Yeah, if Chris is listening, yeah, tough, you should have been here. Welcome to Thinking Deeply About Primary Education, the podcast that makes time and space to really think about pedagogy, teaching and learning, professional development, anything of interest to time-poor but enthusiasm-rich primary teachers. This week, I'm joined by Adam Woodward.
Hi, Kieran.
And Liv Dempsey.
Hello.
And together, we're going to explore the mysterious world of independent schools. But first, Adam, what you reading for?
Hey, what you reading for?
I've been reading a fantastic article on narrowing the achievement gap for disadvantaged pupils by Dempsey and McLean from 2018. It was for some work that I was doing this week, and it summarised some key factors that had an impact on narrowing the gap with pupil premium children, and it stated some really good practice to be used in schools, from strong leadership and having high quality teaching and learning, which you'd expect, an inclusive curriculum, parental engagement, use of data, effective use of teachers, or the best teachers to teach intervention groups, which I know is something that's been mentioned on here. I think, Kieran, you've mentioned it before about in Singapore, the most experienced teachers teaching the lower retaining children. That really boosted results quite quickly. So that was really interesting to see. And then the use of funding and effective use of pupil voice and feedback as well. Some really good points and some really excellent case studies of schools around South London as to how they have narrowed that gap. So I found it really interesting, and it was linked with some work that I was doing this week, not linked to the independent sector, but as we're going to talk about. But really interesting nevertheless. So Liv, what are you reading for?
So I have literally just started doing a master's in educational leadership and management, and I'm reading the dullest of dull things about SWOT analysis. So I went for a lazy read this week, which was Mark Hayes' summary of the Ofsted English Research Review, which was really interesting. English is my thing. And I found myself really thinking about Jane Considine's The Right Stuff and her spelling book, which we're using in some year groups in school that we're trialing. And there was lots in there about vocabulary and modelling. And I know on Twitter, I saw a couple of discussions about whether or not her stuff was too scaffolded. And that when moderators are looking at pieces, you can see that there's a lot of similarities between children's work. So it's quite interesting to read this, talking about how important modelling is, how important rehearsing sentences are together, and then children moving on to the independent right. So it really seemed to kind of support what she was doing. So it's a discussion I think we're going to have at school as to how effective it is, and not that we are moderated, but I think it was an interesting aspect to think about whether or not, it is too scaffolded or it is the perfect scaffold for children. Kieran, what are you reading for?
Nice. They both sound really interesting. I've actually been reading a paper that Sam Sims recommended in Discord. I don't know if you guys picked up on that. It was teaching children to read irregular words, a comparison of 3 instructional models. And that's from Danielle Kohlenbrander, and Kate Nation and Anne Castles were involved. It's quite a big team. Really interesting. I think Neil's summary was quite good in Discord. He said, not sure how much it changes on this side of the Atlantic, but I think it's going to cause some waves on the other side. So really interesting, and something we're definitely going to follow up on the podcast. And yeah, if Chris is listening, yeah, tough, you should have been here, because I've just taken you what you're reading for. We're going to discuss independent sector, something that you guys both have lots of experience of. I think it'd probably be really useful to get an idea on how much experience and what type of experience, because obviously we've been talking on the Discord for quite a while now, but I think really sort of useful to know where you guys are coming from. So Liv, I don't know if we start with you. Do you want to sort of tell us who you are and where you're from?
Yeah, sure. So I am currently Director of Studies super snazzy job title, essentially academic deputy, for a prep school just on the outskirts of a very prestigious secondary college in Berkshire. I've been there, this is the end of my 3rd year, and prior to that I was in middle leadership in state system, so I've had a good mix of both, basically.
I am also a Director of Studies in a school in Kent. We're a through school, so we are a prep school and senior school, so we go from nursery straight away through to 18. I was in state system before then for 9 years, and moved to the sector purely because there was an opportunity for maths leadership role, and it wasn't the sector I was necessarily interested in, it was more of the career progression for me. It just so happened to be there. I've been at my school for 5 years, started as maths lead, and then the change in leadership structure gave me the opportunity to become Director of Studies. And so now, rather than maths, I'm now responsible for the development of all of our curriculum and that transition across to our senior school as well, which is really, really exciting. So that's me.
Nice. So like, I'm coming at this from a complete novice standpoint. When we went to Singapore, we visited Dulwich College out there so that we could talk to the teachers there about how they saw the Singaporean system, so we can sort of get a bit of a balance. But that's the extent of my experience of the independent sector. So I think the best question to start with is, what are the biggest myths and misconceptions around independent schools and independent schooling?
So that everybody is rich is number one. That it's full of yummy mummies and they all just turn up at the gates in their gym gear, drop little Philomena off, wave at her and poodle off into the sunset to their Range Rover to go off to the gym. I think that is probably the biggest thing. Where my school's situated, we are on the edge of the grammar school system in Berkshire and Bucks. And so we have a lot of families who want to send their children our way because they think that's the best start for them. They're working, both parents are full-time working, and literally their only disposable income is to go to school and to send their kids somewhere where they think they're going to have the best start in life.
I think for me, where I am, a very affluent area of Kent, we do have parents that turn up in their gym gear and drop little Philomena off in Range Rovers and go off. But very similar, it's not as common as you would expect and you would think. There are parents of children that I've taught who are working 2-3 jobs to put their children through what they feel is the best start for them in their education. And I think, yeah, it is a myth that should be dispelled quite quickly. They're not all like that. And I think it also depends on the area of the country that you are as well. Like I said, it's a very affluent area of Kent compared to where Liv is, and other areas of the country, it might not be the same situation. Just because it's in an independent school doesn't necessarily mean that all the parents are coming from very wealthy backgrounds. Another thing I'd like to mention as well is that it's not an easy life. People don't join the independent sector because they've just given up on teaching. It comes with its own demands and its own pressures, which I'm sure that we'll talk about. And for me, and again, mate, this is my circumstance, not all our parents are awful and demanding and on your case 24/7. Yes, the same state sector, there will be that odd parent who's constantly trying to badger you and talk to you about progress and how Joe's doing in school. And I think that's the same anywhere. And yes, we have those parents as well, and they have access to our email and able to email us if they want to talk to us, and we're available to talk to them within reason. We make sure as a rule that we try and at least leave a standing email within 24 hours, even if it means that we find time to talk to them another time. And so that's a slight difference, but I think not all of them are the awful parents. We've got some amazing parents where we are and are so supportive of everything that we do and just love the school and love what we do for our children. And I think that's a myth that should be dispelled, that not all parents are there with pitchforks asking questions and demanding 24 hours of your time all the time.
I think on the flip side of that, though, it is different, the parental demands. We said, every school has different sets of demands, but at the end of the day, our parents are our customers. And whereas when I was in state system, if a parent didn't necessarily agree with what I was saying, I could very sweetly tell them that I was the educator and therefore we were going to carry on doing whatever it was that they disagreed with. Whereas I can't really get away with doing that. I can try and explain to parents, but at the end of the day, they are our customer base and they can walk with their feet, and it's bums on seats for us. So it's that really fine balance, I think, of making sure that you aren't overwhelmed by the parental demands, but that you're still meeting their needs and their requirements. Conversely, though, my school doesn't give out our teachers' email addresses because we know that it can be really overwhelming. So again, it's just like the state system. Every different school in the independent sector has their own little nuances, I think.
At the end of the day, it's a business. And whilst, yes, the demands on from parents are not as high as they maybe perceived to be, and at least that's my experience, if a parent does have a problem with something and they've got 4 children in the school who are and they're each paying their fees, then they need to be listened to, and they will be listened to because money talks. And if there aren't bums on seats, then the school doesn't stay open, and people lose their jobs. So it's finding that fine balance between, I think, and I think that's an important thing to consider with the independent sector.
I'm really glad I asked, because those are 2 of the things that I will, in my making stuff up based on what I see on TV. You expect everybody to be really sort of well off. You expect lots of pressure, but basically that's what I think of. I think of very demanding academic rigor, high expectations, and sort of no split between no clear boundaries, but so listening to you guys talking about the idea that it's not as perceived is really, really interesting. I mean, I hope I'm not jumping to another question. Having listened to us talk about issues of workload on the podcast before, how do you reckon the 2 balance up? Because one of my other preconceptions might be that there could be less work in the independent sector, but I don't think that's quite true from talking to you guys on Discord.
No, I think, one of the things that, from a completely superficial and shallow point of view, that attracted me to working in independent sector versus state is I get 17 weeks holiday instead of 13, which is great. It means I get cheap flights as well. I'm really lucky at my school that our chef feeds me really well, and I get a 3-course lunch every day, and she does a great job of fattening me up for Christmas. But on the flip side of it, our days tend to be slightly longer. Our expectations are that we do a little bit more maybe outside of work hours, but I think although we've got that extra time in the holiday, there is that pressure to maybe do extra stuff. So we're doing a senior schools event after school tomorrow, for example, so that's something that we'll stay for. We'll do specialist subject drop-ins as well as parents' evenings. We do parent workshops, which staff are invited to. But again, I think it depends on your school. We make sure that we don't ask our staff to ever come in at weekends. So if we do any Christmas fairs, summer fairs, or anything like that, there's no expectation for staff to come, because we're really conscious of making sure that that work-life balance stays healthy.
Yes, we have longer holidays. It's lovely. And my wife is very appreciative of the fact that we get cheaper holidays than other teachers. But yes, in terms of organising workshops, having more parental engagement in school and having something on offer. I've been told a few times, right, what are we doing differently than a state sector? Why should Joe Bloggs send their children to our school when they can get exactly what we're offering, or what we're offering in a state school, and save themselves a lot of money? So it's about, you need to stand out, and especially within the area that I'm in at the moment in Kent, there are quite a few independent schools, and they need to stand out above each other. And so it's offering something different, whether that be parent workshops that parents can come into, after school. Cheese and wine evenings, Liv and I were talking about earlier, and things like that. The Christmas fairs, Easter fairs. What can we offer to bring, and especially post-COVID as well, get our parents back in school and engaging. One of our whole school targets this year was to improve parental engagement in a post-COVID world. We'd had 2 years of parents having to drop their children off at the car park and not being allowed in school. So it's how do we engage parents? And I think what we're trying to do is offer a lot more for parents to see in school, the drop-ins in the morning to come in and see what their children are doing, the key events that we have on in school as well. And I think some of those things I'm sure there are people listening now saying, yeah, we do that in the state sector as well. But I think those pressures are there as well to have to put that on, to make sure that parents feel as though they know what's going on in school. They know that they're getting value for money. And I think that comes with a mental pressure from teachers, from leaders in school as well, to make sure that the school is standing out above other competitors within the sector and within the area as well. In terms of workload, we're trying to reduce it. So last year I led a working party on our feedback policy, or our marking policy as it was, and changed it to more feedback based on what I've heard from on here with yourself, Kieran, and guests, and from research as well, to move to more live marking feedback, looking at a mastery model to make sure that those misconceptions are addressed quickly. And so then the whole written marking element of our role is reduced as much as possible. And so we've been trying to do that. It just, like everything, it just takes time. And I think COVID has kind of put a stop to certain things, but has also given us the opportunity to put new things in place and start afresh. Now we're coming back. So there are lots of similarities, I think, with the state sector, but also some differences in terms of, again, parental involvement.
I would dread to think what size I would be if someone was cooking me a 3-course meal every lunchtime.
It's not just the 3-course lunch. There's also substantial snack at break time and high tea after school. So, yeah, I think I put on about 2 stone-ish.
We have a cafe, and we're entitled to 2 free hot drinks from the cafe a day. So try to make use of that as much as possible. So 2 hot chocolates a day, plus my 3-course meal at lunch, which is great. They do have a salad bar, which I probably should take advantage of a little bit more, but I don't think I do enough. So definitely something to look for in the future. Use the salad bar more often.
No chance. Yeah. I mean, I saw your face whenever I was talking about workload, and Adam, and I use preconceptions specifically because preconceptions are normally unfairly held, and I accept, like I said, come from a novice position. I just want to almost sort of see what it's like. So ask the question. Now, if someone were to ask you about working in the independent sector, say they wanted to make the move from state to independent, what reasons would you give in support of such a decision?
Starting with the shallow, obviously, the food, the holidays, really, really shallow, lovely gifts. The parents are super, super generous. During lockdown, I'm a form tutor as well for year 5, and my year group partner and I, our birthdays are one day after each other. And so to keep the kids and ourselves entertained during lockdown, we did afternoon tea on both days. And the parents sent us champagne and truffles from Fortnum and Mason so that we could have birthday champagne with our afternoon tea with the kids, because they were so grateful that we'd put on extra things for the children during lockdown. So the parental community and the whole community ethos is fantastic. It is so rewarding. The opportunities that you get to see the children explore is fantastic. We have specialist staff that teach 2 languages from reception up to year 6. We offer sport 4 days a week. Every child swims every week from year 3 to 6, and they do a term and a half in year 1 and 2. The facilities, like I said, we're really near a very prestigious secondary school. We get to use their research library, we get to use their swimming pool, we get to use their chapel for our Christmas services. There's so many amazing extra opportunities that you wouldn't get if you were in the state system. And it's often referred to as the dark side and people selling out. And, you know, Adam and I had this conversation. We both came into independent sectors from completely different routes. I was privately educated my entire life. Adam wasn't, and we've ended up doing exactly the same job at the same time. And it's, you know, people think it's you're a sellout to go there. It's not that at all. It's just different.
It kind of goes back when I was saying before about the myths about parents being awful and demanding. When you get to the end of a term or the end of a year or a birthday, they are very, very generous and very, very caring with their time and their money. We've just had a little boy. He's 2 months old, and they spent, I don't know how much buying presents, but not just for him, but for his older brother as well. So grateful of the caring nature of parents, and they do care. They care about their children's education, but I think they care about their child's teachers as well, and I think that shows, and it's lovely. The resources of the school are great. As Liv was saying, we've got a specialist drama teacher, we've got specialist music specialist, MFL, we've got PE teachers who teach swimming, PE. We've got outdoor education. We've got 26 acres of land in our school and a wooded area where children have got access to forest school, timetabled once a week. And then from years 4 to 6, it's outdoor education, where children are learning those life skills. Like they learn how to start fires, albeit safely. They learn how to carve wood, and they learn how to use the outdoors. It's a great opportunity that, unfortunately, for lots of different reasons, that the state sector don't have. We've got our own swimming pool, and our teachers get, and I don't know if this is the same for you, Liv, we haven't spoken about this, but our teachers get a minimum of 20% PPA time. So essentially it's 1 day out a week. The way that it works with our timetable, it's not in the state sector where it's like you've got a block of an afternoon. It's dependent on when specialist teachers are teaching your class. So if your class have got drama with our specialist drama teacher, that hour is yours, unless you are teaching another class. So for example, Kieran, if it were you might be asked to teach year 2 maths, for example, as part of your timetable, as well as being a year 5, year 6 teacher. And so some teachers will get all of that time whenever their class being taught by specialists, or you might be used to teach other classes as well and use your expertise. And I think that's something that, and I know we'll probably come onto this a little bit later about what the state sector could potentially benefit from as well. I think as well, having a broad and balanced curriculum. So I've spoken about the resources and the specialist teachers. It's not just English, maths, reading, writing. It is so much more. There is dedicated time, timetabled for drama, for music, for art, that maybe fall by the wayside sometimes in a state school, especially with the pressures of SATs and Ofsted, and trying to meet certain standards. You don't necessarily get that with the independent sector. So lots of really, really good opportunities. I think that's one reason why parents send their children to an independent school as well, is because they know they'll get that broad curriculum. And again, Liv and I were talking earlier about if you've got children with specific interests and specific talents, whether it be musically or dramatically, then an independent sector is probably a better route to go down if possible, because that time will be dedicated for that within curriculum time. Whereas you may not, and I apologise, I'm not speaking for every state school here because I know that's probably not the case, but that dedicated time within the curriculum for art, for drama, for music, etc., is available there, whereas it might not necessarily be the case in the state system.
I think behaviour as well is an important one to touch on. So working in the state sector, I've had tables thrown at me. I'm only 5'2", so I'm quite short. So year 5s and 6s tend to be my height or taller. And in the past, I've had a year 5 boy front up to me until I asked him if he was actually going to hit a woman, at which point he backed off. Now that would never, ever, ever happen. There's a lot more respect. From that point of view, you wouldn't have that level of behaviour. You know, sort of, if I've had a day of poor behaviour in my class, it's because Philomena's called out a couple of times, or you know, she might have fallen out with one of her friends because their new Smiggle pencil case is the same as someone else's, kind of thing. But I wouldn't have that level of, you know, frustration with behavior, I think. But on the flip side, Anna and I were saying earlier that actually sometimes it also means that children can be really blasé. You know, oh, well, I know I shouldn't be wearing my trainers, I should be wearing my school shoes, but bothered. And if I've left my PE kit at home, I'll just get the office to ring my mum, and then she'll bring it for me. So there's kind of a lack of responsibility maybe as well, I think, that comes with them.
Are the class sizes a selling point, or is it really intense? Because sometimes when I'm working in a 1 to 3 group, an hour seems like a really long time sometimes. This could have been shorter. So I don't know if I had cope with the whole day. Well, what do you think? Is it in the pros list or the cons list?
We have class sizes of maximum of 20. And I can feel listeners' eyes rolling into the back of their heads as they're listening. But this is the situation in my school, and might not necessarily be the same with all independent schools. We do not have teaching assistants in years 4 to 6. Our head teacher, for whatever reason, no matter how much research I put in front of him to say otherwise, doesn't see the benefit in those older years, because you've only got 20 children in your class. And whilst, yeah, the class sizes are smaller, teaching assistants are more than just the number of children in the class and taking that number away. There's a lot more to it, and the same day intervention. And so there are things that I think the older children miss out on in that sense. Yes, they get myself, and there's 20 of them as a maximum. There are some classes that don't have that maximum at the moment, and are a bit smaller. And but I think that there are those pressures there as well, to make sure that you are catering for all of the needs in your class. And actually, one thing I probably should have mentioned earlier about the myths in the independent sector, they're not all high attainers. They're not all the brightest of the bright. We've got a large number of SEND children in our school, and parents send them to independent schools because this will be a really nurturing environment for them, rather than the pressure of the state system where they're falling behind. So we get a lot of children with a lot of different needs in the school as well, and we need to cater for those as well. And that's the same in the state sector. I completely understand that. And there are some state schools that don't have teaching assistants and have classes of 30 to up to 35. I think it's knowing that, yeah, it's not all it's cracked up to be. Sometimes it's difficult, and in the same way as teaching in the state school class is difficult as well. But yeah, class sizes are lovely and smaller.
It's glorious come report writing season, obviously, because you're like, ha ha ha, I've got a third less than everyone else, which is lovely. I totally get what you mean about it being a bit intense, and sometimes you think, or you know, it's a lot less people to concentrate on. Similarly to Adam, we're not academically selective, so we do have a broad range of ability. We do have SEND children. We do, however, have one TA per year group from 3 to 6. We're 2 formentary, so we tend to split them between maths and English primarily, and then in the afternoon they tend to do same day interventions or groups or anything like that, which is really handy. I love having the smaller class sizes because so as well as my form tutor role, I teach English to year 5, and I tend to get so wrapped up in teaching English that I go off on weird and wonderful tangents, and because there's fewer children, they all tend to come along on the journey with me, and get really involved in whatever vocabulary thing I'm whittering on about, you know, and they all want to contribute, and there's not so many children vying for your attention, obviously, so it means that you can give more of your time to the children, but also the children can give more of their time to you, so it gives you a lot more time to explore their writing in English in particular. Sorry that I keep harking to English, but obviously that's my thing, and so I think it's of a real benefit. On the flip side of that, though, I recently looked at, I think it was an EEF study where they showed, it's a really interesting infographic where it had the cost benefit analysis of different things in school, so like teaching assistants and reading intervention programs and small class sizes. And actually small class sizes came out as something that's really expensive but doesn't actually make that much difference. So whilst I maybe feel like it does make a difference in my teaching and that parents' perceptions are that it does make a difference, on the whole it would appear that it doesn't.
Yes, I think I've seen that same thing. Our Senko led a teaching and learning meeting on quality first teaching and said that exact same thing. Yes, we've got smaller class sizes, but actually the difference that makes in outcomes is not as much as you would think it was. There is a lot more evidence in other areas that we can implement, such as quality first teaching, that has much more of an impact on outcomes. Which, yeah, it was really interesting to see that, actually.
So Liv, at the very start of that, you mentioned 2 languages for a considerable amount of time a week. Do your kids leave proficient in those languages?
So it's a real struggle. They have half an hour of French and half an hour of Spanish from reception to year 5. And then in year 6, they have half an hour of French and half an hour of Latin. And I'm often having discussions with our MFL specialists, or I should say MAFL, because obviously Latin is an ancient language, not a modern one, about how effective their lessons are and how we struggle with the timetable, because we're trying to fit so many things in. Obviously things give, and they find it really tricky because they've only got them for half an hour a week, and potentially there might be some lateness because the children are moving around the school. When the children have specialist lessons in the prep school, so junior school, they move to the specialist classroom, so you do lose a little bit of time in a lesson. So all of that, you start with some revision, going back over topics. I think they tick along really nicely, and their interest is held, and the lessons are active, and they enjoy languages. I wouldn't quite say proficient was the best adjective that I would use.
Yeah, I mean, that's just a personal interest, because the way languages are seen to be taught don't necessarily match up with how I think we learn languages best. And I just want to know whether it was different, but it sounds like you get a lot of the same issues that most schools will face. Because I mean, this is not the vehicle for me to go on a rant about how to teach languages. And maybe I'm not even qualified to do so, but that's not going to stop me at some point. just interesting. What would you make them aware of? You've told them all the great things that can happen, the great reasons to be a part of the independent sector. What sort of words of warning might you give them?
I'd like to come in and say timetabling is the bane of my life. Now, I'm not responsible for it, thankfully, but it is an absolute nightmare. When you've got all these specialists who in our school are teaching, some specialists are teaching across 2 schools. So our computing lead teaches from reception through to year 8, trying to fit in her timetable. And then all those other specialist timetables, what we get as class teachers is then this is what's left over. And within that, we fit in our English, our maths, which is 4.5 hours a week. So our timetable split into half an hours. So if you try to imagine it, it's difficult to kind of explain without having it in front. But if you think of our timetable split into 10 half an hours a day, and then you've got break and lunch and so forth. We've got, for our computing, it's 2 of those half an hours. So it's an hour block, but it's split over, it's split into half an hours. And you've got that for drama and you've got that for music. And then the class teacher is left with, this is what's left. And you've got to fit in 4.5 hours of English. So you need 9 English slots. The same for maths, 4.5 hours, 9 math slots. You've got 2 hours of humanities. And you've got half an hour of PSHE and half an hour of RE. And I know from the RE subject review states that anything less than 45 minutes is unsatisfactory. We're very aware of that. But with our timetable constraints, bane of my life, it's not possible to fit everything in. We have 5 hours of PE a week, with an hour of PE, an hour of swimming, an hour of outdoor education, which I'm going to class as PE in this sense, an hour of games and then an hour and a half of fixtures, because pupils take part in sports against other schools and fixtures, which is a great opportunity for them. It's more than we spend on our English and our maths. And I haven't even mentioned reading. And I know I've spoken to Matt Swain about this before, and I won't repeat what he said to me, but we don't have time to fit reading in the curriculum within our timetable. We have a library slot where our class go to see our librarian, she'll read to them. And we are trying to find time and have fixed points where we have teachers modeling reading to our children, and our reading comes through our English and it comes through our writing from there. But it's very difficult to fit everything in, and especially when you actually get your timetable and realize you can't have an hour of maths. You have to have half an hour at 9 o'clock in the morning, and the other half an hour to that hour is at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. It's tough, and I don't know, Liv, if you've got the same experience with timetables, but it is tricky because specialists have to come first because they are teaching such a vast number of children across the whole school.
So I see your timetable woes, and I raise you having to do the timetable. At least, I think last year I must have done it once every half term, completely redone the timetable for the entire school. To top that off, we also don't tend to have supply teachers in. So if we need to do cover, 20% non-contact time, that isn't 20% because you potentially would have to cover when people are off sick. So that all gets moved around into the ether as well. Although luckily it's not me that has to do the cover timetable, because that is the most hideous thing in the world ever. I would also say that sometimes it's just frenetic and it's so busy because you've got to keep to fit everything in. And exactly as Adam said, there's half an hour slots. That we do so much. This week we've gone to Windsor Castle because it's on our doorstep, so we went for half the day there, so that's half a day of lessons gone. And then we have lectures after school. Sometimes we have parents come in. We just had a lecture on the civil service and arranging the Commonwealth Games, which was phenomenal. But it just feels sometimes like it's non-stop, and because you don't have that half a day block of PPA that's ring fenced out, you just have your half an hours here and there when you can grab them. It sometimes can be really overwhelming, and I think if you're not really structured in your time management and your prioritization of things, it can really be overwhelming, because you'll set aside, I know I certainly do, I'm going to do my marking in that half an hour slot, and in that half an hour slot I'm going to speak to those 3 parents. And then in that half an hour slot, I'm going to do a pupil voice or a learning walk or something. And then that doesn't happen because it's the same with every school, isn't it? Something always comes up you can't ever have a day that goes to plan. Nothing ever goes to plan, but it just feels a little bit more busy, if that makes sense.
Yeah, total sense. I would hate that because I like to have, here are my 3 hours, I'm going to do something substantial with this time, and literally ticking everything off. If I've got 20 minutes, like say there's 20 minutes before I do gate duty, I'm going to have a coffee during that 20 minutes because it's only 20 minutes. And, so I'm glad you warned me, with the meals to avoid and the frenetic time management. I think I might be in the state sector for the long term. What do you think mainstream schools can learn from independent schools?
Offering as many amazing opportunities as possible. I know that you have spoken in the past about specialists and skills and getting the best out of people. And I'm sure that didn't you narrow down to just teaching 3 things? In your wonderful when you're education minister and you've narrowed it down to 3 things, you're essentially following the independent school model of having specialists teach those things and having that wealth of knowledge. And when we were speaking about languages earlier, having these amazingly fluent people teach with an amazing accent for the children is phenomenal. Our music teacher is just amazing. We were in assembly one day, and I'm sure there are other music teachers out there that are like this, but I was completely wowed having never seen one like this. The PowerPoint wouldn't work and the song wouldn't play, and he literally just went, one moment, tinkle, 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 and played the whole thing just off the top of his head. Like, having talent like that at your fingertips is just phenomenal. And I think that, I don't know how it would work. Obviously, you as education minister will make this work, but having those specialists in would be a massive thing.
Yeah, I think it is a systemic thing. It's something that investment needs to come from outside of mainstream schools to keep up with in that respect, and it has to become a desirable place for people of those talents. You know, for instance, he sounds as if he were in a thespian or a musician in another life, and has, you know, does the teaching bit on the side. I don't know. Yes, but so I think you need to make it attractive. So I think that's out of school hands, but definitely something for my, it'll probably be about 2028 by the time I'm in government, you know, and we will sort it out.
I haven't really got anything left to add to that, really. I think Liv sums it up really well. I think, yeah, making use of what teachers are interested in and where their passions are, and I think we could do a lot more of. Obviously, this has been said in podcasts before, that in primary in particular, we can't be specialists in everything, but yet we've got to teach everything. So how do we do that? So I think it's a case of sharing good practice and teachers having the opportunities to share their passions and share their interests and share their strengths within the curriculum as well, and feel confident enough to be able to do that, and given the platform to be able to do that as well, where the independent sector has these specialist teachers, giving state school teachers as well the opportunities to go and teach a geography lesson to year 2 if you are passionate about geography, to go and teach art to year 6 if you are a very keen and artist. And that's not just being a subject leader, that's the opportunities to team teach and finding time in the timetable to be able to do that. And I think with the constraints and the pressures that go on in all sectors, I think it's finding that time where children can really benefit from the expertise of teachers that we have.
I mean, when I think about my sort of specialist model, if I often think about, well, it works in independent schools. How many teachers would I need in a 2-form entry school were we to work within the curricular expectations of mainstream? So 1 hour of, was it 1 hour of PE? No, 2 hours PE rather than 5. How many teachers? How can I make it work?
How long is your school day?
Roughly 6 hours, including lunch.
Nah.
Needs to be longer.
You'd need multiple, I think you'd need multiple specialists to cover everyone across the week. So you'd need, for example, 2 PE teachers at least to be able to teach every class. So if you've got 6 hours in a day, and two classes, depends. I don't think, maybe I'm doing the maths wrong, but I think you'd need more specialists. You'd need probably 2 of each. So I think for funding, I think it'd be more than the normal 80% going on staff costs from your funding every year.
It's essentially a woeful business model.
Yeah, this is the brick wall I keep hitting, because I have actually tried to run the numbers and to try and make a timetable. But obviously, if you know, Neil has this idea for the Neil Almond Free School, or the NAF school, as we like to call it, and I'm thinking, okay, well, if he gives me the chance, and you can only bring, you know, maybe 2 classes through at the start, and then you go 3 classes, 4 until you eventually get to school. So you're going to almost have like 20 teachers for 1 class of kids at some point. So I don't think it's going to get very far with the DFE. And I just thought, well, actually, you guys have experienced this kind of timetabling. Liv, you've done this kind of timetabling. It sounds like I need to change the whole education system if I'm going to make this work.
Or you just take out some subjects that are surplus to requirements from the national curriculum.
I think you'd have to also find some really specialists so that you could try and maximize your coverage, minimizing your costs. I'm not going to lie, I'm a demon on a spreadsheet. I could probably somehow wangle some little algorithm to make it work and to make sure that everybody was covered fairly. Every year I'm presented with these new challenges of fitting square pegs into round holes and making things, and somehow I manage it. There's always someone that I've really annoyed, but just tend to give them cake and then keeps them at bay.
Yeah, I reckon people would have to teach at least 2 subjects, you know. So the maths teacher would teach one of the sciences, maybe all of the sciences, you know, and sort of combine them like that. But I think that's probably for another chat a long way down the line. Now, is there anything you think independent schools could learn from mainstream schools?
Adam's going to say exactly the same thing as me. Collaboration, CPD, best practice, sharing, like not being tiny little toddlers in the playgrounds where we have to keep our precious secrets. And as a school, we are most definitely trying to not be like that. I'm trying to set up a local network of curriculum leads so that we can try and share best practice, and not just the independent ones as well, but also the state, so that we can work together. There's a lot of insular nature, I think, sometimes, and a lethargy about moving forward and moving away from what's always been as the prep school model. And I think post-COVID, a lot of independent schools have had to change because, you know, we had to have our remote learning offer, and we straight away were online learning, and we were Zooming every day. We had live lessons that we were teaching. We had recorded lessons on Google Classroom, and the children's days were filled because a lot of parents were working from home still, and they needed their children entertaining more so than anything. But I think, yeah, just that willingness that, yes, they are a competition. And yes, I know that actually if somebody does go down the road to them, that potentially means that someone's in danger of losing their job because we don't have enough money to sustain the number of teachers, or, you know, worst case scenario. But yeah, I think independent schools are still really, really reticent to share any of their closely guarded educational secrets.
Exactly that. Yeah, just sharing good practice. And yeah, it doesn't need to be a secret, because all independent schools, and especially around, as I said, where I am, there are several independent schools in our area. It's a case of they're the competition. And so if I wanted to go and see good practice in another independent school, the chances are it'd probably be rejected by that school. Well, no, I don't want you coming in and taking all of our hard work for you to come and take our children away and money from our pockets. Whereas, yeah, in the state sector, like it's rife. Like you see Andrew Percival, who is inviting people left, right, and centre to his school. And I'd love to live closer to be able to go and visit. That doesn't happen in the independent sector. You don't have people inviting other teachers from the sector in. So I think, yeah, it's exactly as Liv said. Like, don't be scared of just working together, because at the end of the day, we all want the same thing for our children. And yes, it's a business, and yes, money ends up being involved, but surely we should be creating a model that is around our context. And just because it works in one school doesn't mean it's going to work everywhere. It's working to the strength of that school, rather than having to keep everything hidden and locked away just for those schools.
I think some of that also is perpetuated by funding and things to do with like the local education authority. So although we aren't beholden to them in the way that state schools are, obviously we still are part of that local education authority. And when our borough offers training and CPD that are curriculum network meetings or subject specific network meetings or all things like that, we're not invited, we're not allowed to come because we're not part of the funded bit of the borough. And so automatically we're excluded. Now, I know that, you know, we have got the funds where other schools haven't, and we can afford to send people on training and things like that. But it's not always the training that is the thing that you get the most out of. I certainly find that meeting people and chatting with people and networking, you know, awful word, is the best way to find out new things and to chat to people and to see what works. It's not necessarily the actual training provider. And we're denied those opportunities, which, I'm sorry, sound like a spoiled brat, but I just think that's really fundamental, and I don't think it's fair.
Are you guys then outliers? Because I see you sharing and learning from other people all the time. Would you consider yourselves outliers even across the teaching body, or is it just sort of the upper echelons of leadership?
I don't think that. I mean, they talk about like with Twitter and things, and teachers on Twitter. It's only 5% of teachers that engage with it, and so whether we're outliers or not, I'm not sure, because I think that's across education in general. We are a small number engaging with research and bringing that into our schools. One thing I've noticed, and again, Liv and I were talking about this earlier, is that teachers, albeit they don't like change as it is, in the independent sector, I feel that they're even more reluctant to change. And this is the way it's always been. And so that's how it's going to stay. And I've found that just trying to put in evidence-informed practices into school, retrieval practice, for example, as a starting point, got some very mixed reviews to start with, even though you go down the why route and this is the purpose and this is how it's going to benefit outcomes. Still, teachers are, oh, it's just something else I've got to do. We changed our English scheme of learning this year to a provider, and it's been fantastic, and the outcomes to promote writing across the school, which was our priority, have been fantastic. But at the start, there were certain teachers who were like, I don't want to do this, not doing this, oh, this is too much hard work. But actually, it was those same teachers who came back to 6 weeks later, a term later, this is amazing. Have you seen the writing that so-and-so's produced? Well, yeah, so if you actually give it a chance and give change a chance, you can see the positive benefits that it's having. And I think from my experience in the independent sector, teachers are more reluctant to that change until they see the outcomes and the results. They feel as though they're being done onto. But it's been fine. It's fine the way it's always been. And they kind of need that push and to see that outcome before they actually turn around and say, well, actually, yeah, it wasn't that bad.
I think we are the outliers in a sense. I didn't realise that was it. Only 5% of teachers were like involved in Twitter. I really didn't realise that. I'm sure that the rest of that 5% have tweeted more than 613 times though, right? I think it's changing. I've been to a couple of events at other independent schools where they have openly showcased what they've done, mainly with technology. And I think part of it is bragging rights and part of it is sharing best practice. But it is still very insular, and it is still rife with sexism, and it is still the old boys corduroy trouser tweed jacket wearing network. So yeah, it is changing. I think one of the reasons it's changing is, from my perception, is there's a lot more crossover now between state and independent. A lot of our teachers have come from state, or they're not the typical prep school background. And I think now in my school, I'm probably the minority of being privately educated all the way through and then becoming a teacher. And it's shifting more the other way.
I can see that actually, that we're getting more state school teachers into the private sector, myself included. We've had some NQTs, or ECTs they are now, but they were NQTs, start from their first year teaching with us in an independent school. And I've said to them, go out and into the world of the state sector and learn your craft, and then come and join the independent sector afterwards. I feel that there can be sometimes a rose-tinted view of education within the independent sector, I think, and really learning how much children value education and really value coming into school from those deprived backgrounds. I think that could be missed when you've got these children who have got everything they could possibly desire at home and in school. I would like to see, and whatever route teachers take, that's entirely down to them. That's my personal opinion. I feel that they would benefit a lot more from that start within their career to then moving to the independent sector if that's how they wish.
That's the same with all ECTs though. I think my placement schools were all leafy Surrey schools where, you know, there was the Surrey average and there was the national average. And it wasn't until one of my final placements where I did it in the middle of a council estate where my little eyes opened wide to the wealth of possibilities out there, and actually like that feeling of, oh my goodness me, I'm actually making a difference. I think it would be really important for all ECTs to experience that journey, and also to experience part of life in the independent sector on that journey. There should be a plethora of diverse opportunities available to all ECTs, and it should be mandatory that you have to go from one end of the scale to the other, like you say, to learn your craft, to see what's out there, to really know what you're talking about, rather than doing your placement in with the school that you then do your NQT or ECT years in, and then you stay there for 35 years, you know, which happens in state and independent.
So how can we bridge the gap or bridge the divide between the systems?
I think doing that, I think making it so that everybody has to experience both, for starters. Obviously, listening to this wonderfully informative podcast about how it is not the dark side, and just getting people to talk more and work together more, and, you know, not be biased towards each other, and to, yeah, just engage in discourse and chat.
I think it's easy for people to see the money within the independent sector. Oh, you get this opportunity, you get that, but we don't. And I think, as we've spoken about, and Liv's spoken about really well, about sharing good practice and sharing what works well in the mainstream and what works well in the independent sector, and finding a happy medium between the two, because the independent sector, I think, has got a lot to learn from state, and perhaps vice versa, and maybe vice versa is challenged a little bit more because of funding, and that is made a lot more difficult with the money available in schools. So they haven't got the opportunity for specialist teachers left, right and centre. Of course they haven't. There are more important areas of development within certain schools, within certain more deprived areas. But I think, as we've said, that collaboration and talking to each other and sharing teachers as well. And so independent schools going into, or independent school teachers going into state schools as well, and maybe giving up some of their time and building that network between them. And Liv said about how she's doing that with curriculum leaders in her area. But being able to do that and share that practice, having an art specialist going into a local primary school just for an afternoon and delivering some CPD, for example, or just going to teach a couple of classes in there and giving them the opportunity they might not normally have, could be something really valuable and really build up that, use the term, network and opportunities that maybe are not always afforded to those children. I think there's something really powerful in that. Moving forward, perhaps.
Maybe that's how you're going to get your business model to work, Kieran. Poaching teachers across from the independent sector to do like their community service.
Yeah, I mean, I've got time. I'll think about it. But obviously, with your proficiency in Excel and spreadsheeting, you know, you'll definitely be on the payroll. I mean, what, 80% teachers, 20% your sort of consultancy cost for the legwork. I mean, it's probably very easy to think, you know, that the reluctance from the independent sector is unique to the independent sector, because we're in our little bubble where we're engaging with research and with professional development almost as a hobby as much as it is our jobs. It's very easy to think that that's the way everybody thinks. But I think across both sectors, there's still a long way to go before it is the norm. You know, people still laugh at me when I talk about reading, about education, you know, either during the school day or in my spare time. And I'm sure that's the same up and down the country and potentially across the world. So yeah, so I think, you know, bit by bit, hopefully the narrative changes. Hopefully the changes to the ECT framework are promoting that, because certainly the ECTs I meet are having much richer discussions about cognitive psychology and about pedagogy and practice than I was when I started teaching, you know. And it took by chance to read David Dye or to read Carl Hendrick and Robin McPherson, and then see that there was a different world out there, you know. So, you know, it's been really, really interesting listening to you guys, and I hope that that listeners will maybe, even, especially if they're in your area, will reach out and try and make those connections. I think that'll be a wonderful thing to happen off the back of this interview. And all that's left to do is to say thank you very much for joining me. Thank you, Liv.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Adam.
Thank you very much, Kieran. Really appreciate the time.
And to everyone at home, until next time, thanks for listening. Have you forgotten the question, Adam?